Hi there. So my name's Iain. I am an ops manager work for Elsevier at the moment. I've been an ops manager for a long time. I can remember installing OSs with 3.5-inch floppy disks, so that's how old I am. I currently head up a core engineering team in Elsevier. Our role is a central team, and the idea is that we deliver core modules primarily in Terraform to deliver AWS infrastructure. They're reusable modules that people sort of like use in an open source manner, so we encourage lots of people to develop into them. We don't sort of like deliver tools that people have to use. We're trying to get people to collaborate with us and so on into an AWS estate, which is many tens of millions of dollars of AWS a year. So you can imagine now Elsevier is large and it is an enterprise. So what I'd like to talk about is DevOps in the enterprise and how it works sometimes and how it doesn't. So firstly, let's talk about some definitions. So DevOps. I hate the word, by the way. I really, really hate the word because it's so misused. I don't know. But anyway, Wikipedia has come to the rescue and given us this definition, which is, it's okay. Yeah, I don't mind. I saw someone outside with a T-shirt of automate or be automated, which I thought was absolutely fantastic T-shirt. But the enterprise, a big business, or a business that's trying to behave in such a way. They are generally heavily regulated. And as we'll see, that can be a little bit of an issue. So, the DevOps journey. So let's take a company starting out, a startup, and we'll grow it all the way to the enterprise, and we'll see what happens, or maybe my take from my experience of how DevOps works on that. So you start off with a small 10 people. You've got one or two full stack developers, another quoted word that I love, or phrase that I love. I don't know, read it, indentured slave, I think, is probably what they actually are trying for with full stack developer. But anyway, so everyone does everything. You work 20 hours a day. Everyone's got tribal knowledge, and it really is great DevOps. Everyone is doing stuff, and everyone's got a stake in things. And then we grow to about 30 employees. 2 or 3 full stack developers. Maybe one of them is starting to specialize in the infrastructure and so on, and and uses the D word and that sort of thing. One development team, common goals, all discussed over beer or whatever, and still, really DevOps is like, the developer can come and talk to the infrastructure guy at the desk and say, thinking about doing this, and it's all really, really. Everyone is again fully involved. Then we get to about 60 to 80 employees. All right, okay, at this point, companies start to either creak and fold, or they grow. And one of the ways they grow is they get their first really big customer. So at this point, development's more specialized, maybe front end, back end, maybe sort of thing, maybe 1 or 2 infrastructure specific people. And then of course the salesperson comes along and they've said, got a new big customer, and they've, new big customer, they've sold them all of this stuff, and they've said, and we can do this, and we can do this, and it's like, well, we can't. It's kind of, they've already sold stuff that we can't do, and so the dev team expands rapidly. It says, oh my God, we've got all this to do, and the focus really is on functional requirements, and it becomes, we have to get these new things out for the customer, the product team saying, we need to do this. And once that happens, things like automation and monitoring we'll put that in later. Let's just get this out to the customer. Let's just to do this. Highest priority is the customer. We've got to do it. And kind of the DevOps. It gets to a little bit, seemingly in the blink of an eye, we've gone from being DevOps, where everyone, we all know what we're doing, we're all working together, to, back to the old DevOps thing, and you've got a wall, and you've got the developers saying, no, I've been told I've got to get this out, and the infrastructure guys saying, hey, but I don't know, we haven't tested it, we don't know how do we monitor this, how does it work, and get it out, and you've got that big wall, you're slinging hand grenades over left, right, and centre. Infrastructure engineers, these 2 infrastructure engineers who sort of thing. Now suddenly on the front line, 3 a.m. wake-up calls. And they start to demand things like, hey, I want some health monitoring. I want to know when it's down. And when it does go down, I want to be able to look in some logs and figure out why it's gone down. And hey, I'd quite like some security policies, please, and machine patching, and it just goes on and on and on. But the product team says, yeah, very, very sensible, yeah, but no, they're not sexy, right? Hey, that's not going to sell me. Customers don't care. That's not going to sell anything. So they just it doesn't. These things don't get done, and they get put on a backlog and so on. And your DevOps ideal is broken down. You've suddenly got infrastructure team and a development team, and then they're not being DevOps together. They're kind of like fighting with each other. And this problem only gets worse once your company gets bigger. 200. You really certainly with European laws and so on. You just get hit with what happens. We get audited. If you don't have information to give to an auditor, then they'll ask for loads of shit, and it's just you're in a heap of trouble. What if there's a security breach? And of course, good old GDPR. I mean, I'm sure we've all, in the last few months, everyone's known about it for 3 years, but no, we did it all in the last 3 months. I'm sure you're all aware of where we're coming from the same place. So how does DevOps work with central governance and policy areas? How does DevOps work with things like someone coming in and saying, "Oh, you've got to do this"? Well, that's not. The way DevOps has been defined, it just doesn't seem to work. How do you have a CD pipeline if it's got to jump through a load of hoops and to be signed off, and it's got to be. How do you allow development teams to do release if suddenly you've got to go through a release management and a release board and all this sort of thing, because people are too scared to release things which might be against GDPR or cause a security breach and so on. It's just and what people tend to do is they write these bloody great big 200-page whatever policy documents. They go, there you go, we've now got policies. This is what you must do. Yeah. No one reads that rubbish. If you're going to rely on your developers reading the policies and saying, "Yeah, okay, I understand that. I'll make sure I won't do that." I mean, yeah, very hopeful and very risky. Yeah, and what happens? Your ops people, because they're no longer DevOps, or they might be writing the infrastructure as code, but they're not. They are saying, whoa, hold on, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. And, sorry. And suddenly they're the police. And no one wants to be the police, even the police don't want to be the police. Suddenly these mates who they used to go down the pub with and the developers, they're going, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. And it's really quite difficult. So, is DevOps dead? Is that the case? If you once you get to a big company, you can't do DevOps. Did you all just come here for the pizza? I don't know. Yeah. So, what I'd like to propose is, and it's really starting to come alive now, is using DevOps methodologies to enable DevOps. So it comes to the subtitle of my talk, the Three-Legged Stool. What is it? What am I talking about? And this thing. So everyone knows the first leg of the stool, right? Infrastructure as code. It's been around for a good number of years now. People are really starting to use it. Not everybody, but it really is starting to be embraced. Terraform, Ansible, God forbid, CloudFormation, whatever. I mean, loads of, custom scripts. I've written a Ruby thing which will... Yeah, okay, fair enough. So that's the first thing. That's the first leg. All right, second leg, configuration as code. Again, fairly widely accepted now. I mean, who the hell goes and logs into a machine and configures stuff and, runs yum update or whatever? I mean, it just doesn't happen.
Whatever that is.
Sorry?
Whatever that is.
Yeah. So again, Ansible, Puppet, whatever, Salt, I don't know. But it's the second leg of Stool. So you've now got infrastructure as code, configuration as code. You can build perfect cattle. Yeah, this whole cattle versus pets thing, right? I'm going to stretch that analogy just a little bit. But what happens if you've built your perfect cattle and someone comes along using these things, codes a perfect wolf, or codes that the bloody gate to the field is open, or whatever. This is just, how do you stop that? Well, do you have your DevOps being the police going, hey, you haven't read the big policy thing. It says you can't do that. You can't create a Jenkins server which is open to the world. That's against policy and stuff. No. So we need a third leg for the stool. Compliance or policy as code. And it's really starting to take off. And this is really the sort of like target of the talk, or I talk about it. I don't think that many people are really starting to get into it. I think DevOps in these positions are still in the victim mentality state of like, well, no one listens to me, I can't do this, I'm all fighting fires that people have gone and put stuff in and so on and so on. So I think we need to, as a group of people who are all linked by one word, all doing completely different jobs, but hey, it's only Craig who understands what DevOps means, as a recruitment person. But so I think we need to really start looking at compliance as code. What is it? What are we trying to achieve here? So what we're trying to achieve is, in the same way that when we build infrastructure, if we run Terraform or whatever, we know that it's not going to what we've told it to do, that's what it's going to do because it's code. And if it isn't code, or if we run it and then we realise that we've made a mistake, we didn't want to do that, it's in version control, we can just, check it out again, make some changes, put it in again, whatever, test it first, everything's good. So let's just have a look at an example policy. Right? Oh, by the way, this is not a technical talk, so you can all switch your brains off, not like the previous two, it's not a thing. So, quite a sensible policy, someone might say. All OS must be running the latest security patch within 2 days of a release to be able to demonstrate, and be able to demonstrate that in an easily consumable report. Someone who's never, ever, understands, has no understanding of what cloud computing is in any sort of scale, but would have written that, but there you go, that's the thing. So, right, how do we do? So, without compliance as code. So first of all, you're going to have to rely on someone to realise that there's actually a new patch out there, and there's a security issue or something that a patch has come out for. So they've got to realise that there is. Then you've got to have a list of all your servers. Which ones are running the OS that is vulnerable, which ones are running that, and where the patch is available, and so on. Yeah. Then you've got to make your patch. You've got to get it into dev. You've got to see if it works. You've got to do this sort of thing. And if it works, great. You've got a patch. You think, yep, this is fine. You then go and put it onto your servers. Yep. And you produce a nice report saying, yep, we had these servers and they're now all patched. Ah, that's fantastic. And then tomorrow, the second patch comes out. And you've got to do it all again. And it's cloud, it's not, your servers have changed and everything like that. And, it's just, it's impossible. On top of this, the developers or whatever are still saying, yeah, we're DevOps, we've got access to production now. It's not the old days where just the ops people had access to production. No, everyone's got access to production, they can do something. And they're happily, merrily going off and still deploying the old thing without the patch and what have you, and suddenly you're DevOps the police again. You're there going, hey, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. Yeah, you don't get invited down the pub anymore, you don't get offers, it's not pleasant. Yep. So let's look at compliance as code as an example. So this is you can be done in many ways. This is how we do it in Elsevier, was one particular example. But as you'll see, there's lots of different things. So taking that policy of all OS must be patched, how do we deal with that? So we have an enterprise bakery based on Packer, another HashiCorp product. I'm not saying they're the greatest company in the world, but they are the greatest company in the world. Packer, and it produces AMIs. Every day, it for all the OSs that we have to support, it does a canary build of those, and it checks whether there's any security patches or kernel patches. If there is, it creates that new AMI, and it shares that AMI with all our AWS accounts. We then have, inside all of our AMIs that we bake, they have a small agent that survives rebaking. And when the instance comes up, it comes up and it reports to our central API where it says, hello, I am this OS, this version, this whatever, and here's my version, sort of thing. And so we know exactly what is running absolutely everywhere. We also have a Terraform module, another great product, by the way. I don't know, you may see a sort of like a pattern emerging here. We have a Terraform module that sits in our part of our ASGs. Whenever there's a scaling event, it will go and it will look, it will query the API, and from Packer, it will query the API and say, what is the latest version for the OS that I'm running? And it will use that, and what is the latest AMI that I need? And it will use that, and it will spin the any scaling event, it will spin that new AMI up. Now, we only tend to do that in development. You don't want to do that in production. It's, you know, it's kind of a bit, you never know what's going to happen. But it's done in development. And we then also have, and then once it's done in development, then, you know, developers know new change, new AMI being installed, they can test it and then push it out to, and say, yep, hit the button, and it then will go out to production as well. We also have a compliance framework using AWS config and various tools that every day it generates a report on many different sorts of compliance rules, and one of them is how many versions behind are you for your OSs. So, for example, when when a big security bug gets raised, as soon as there's a patch, we can straight away see the day after, right, who hasn't patched, you know, as soon as our patch is out there, we can see straight away, right, who hasn't patched their OS, yeah, and their compliance drops, red light, you know, warning lights go off, and then people have to start patching. I mean, in this method, we had in our bakery and shared out to our 380 different and it is 380 AWS accounts, the Spectre and Meltdown, right for as soon as that patch was released, we had that out before our internal security ISDP, as they're called, before they even actually raised the alert to say, hello, there is a security issue going on, you know, sort of thing. So it's, you know, and the whole point is no one has to worry about it. It's just there, it's done. There are plenty of, I mean, that's just one way, that's ours. There are plenty of other ways. Sentinel is in all of HashiCorp's enterprise products. It is probably the most fully featured policy as code thing out there at the moment. It really is exceptional, down to absolutely any sort of level. However, of course, it is, you know, HashiCorp enterprise products are not cheap, shall we say. InSpec, another one. Some people I've heard people use. I haven't used it, but I've had some good reports on it. Using policy as code, it's a bit more reporty, more like our stuff than Sentinel. Sentinel is actually so is kind of pre-moderation. Before you even try and put something out there, it will stop you if you're breaking policy. Ours, for example, some of it will stop you before you break policy, but some of it it's retrospective, it's kind of post-moderation. So, and the InSpec is kind of a bit more post-moderation than that. AWS config. Again, yep, you can set up loads of rules to say, I want it to look at this, I want it to look at this, I want it to look at this. You know, you can't do this, you can't do this, whatever. But again, post-moderation. So you can spin up your Jenkins server, open to the world, and AWS config runs about, what, once every 10 minutes or so. So, you know, the Bitcoin miners have got about 10 minutes of your resources before, you know, the AWS config comes and tears it down. Yeah? Or you can roll your own. Which, like we've done. You know. Okay. So, just to quickly, so we do our compliance like this as policies. All our software policies, infrastructure. We some of them we run as enforcement, so that it can't be done. You know, loads and loads of reporting we have on it, so that, and we're now starting to get buy-in from you know, the VPs of the product to say, oh, what's my compliance status like? And they're, you know, they're really, it is slowly starting to take effect, and that's really what the whole point of this talk is. It's no one is going to read a 200-page document, right? No one is going to read a 200-page document. Which was probably written in 1995 and still refers to Windows 95 or something like, or, you know, we're running on, you know. So the idea is that, you know, you codify all this policy and you make it very visible and very obvious, and it gets into people's genes. They really, they understand why, because they don't have to think about it. You know, if you'd have asked a developer to get on his bike and cycle down to Canary Wharf and go into, I don't know, Telecity or something and rack a server if you wanted to actually start a server up, you know, he'd gone, no. Right? Now, you can just do it in code. Of course, they want to do it. Exactly the same thing applies here. If you're going to tell a developer, no, you've got to read this policy and you've got to follow it, they're going to go, yeah, no. But if it's just part of the ecosystem that you're building, and it's code, and they just go, well, I just can't do that, and it just makes it so much easier. And the big thing is, you don't turn your DevOps into police. You're not the person who's standing there always going no. You know, you start to get invited down the pub again, and it's all, you know, pretty good. Yeah. And I think, you know, now we, like I say, pretty much everyone in this room, I should imagine, wouldn't think, just doesn't think twice about infrastructure as code. 10 years ago, that was a big thing. It was unusual. It was rare. Same configuration as code. We don't think twice about it. It's kind of like, well, of course you're going to do that. And I think tomorrow or mañana, we'll be doing exactly the same thing with policy as code. Thank you very much.